They say every girl dreams of her wedding day, the white dress, the flowers, the kiss that seals forever. And I was no different. I walked into the Ritz-Carlton Grand Ballroom that night believing I was the luckiest woman alive. I thought love had chosen me. I thought I had won my happily ever after. The chandeliers sparkled, the cameras flashed, and the man standing beside me, Alexander Reed, looked every bit the prince I thought he was. They called it the wedding of the century. Guests whispered my name with envy. But what no one knew was that behind the diamonds and champagne, behind his perfect smile, was a secret so cruel it would shatter me before the night was over. My wedding night did not end with love. It began with betrayal. And that betrayal became the fire of my revenge. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments. The chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton Grand Ballroom glowed like constellations, their golden light spilling across marble floors that sparkled like they were cut from heaven. I stood there in my ivory satin gown, a diamond tiara on my head, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. For one night, I wasn't just Emily Carter from a middle-class family. I was the bride of Alexander Reed, the heir to one of America's wealthiest empires. People whispered my name with awe. They called me lucky. They called me beautiful. They called me Mrs. Reed. And I smiled, letting the camera flashes blind me, letting the applause wash over me, convincing myself that this was love. That I was chosen, that I mattered. Alexander leaned down during the ceremony, his lips brushing my ear. Smile wide, darling. This is the happiest day of our lives. And I did smile. My cheeks burned, my eyes glistened. Because I believed him. But fairy tales lie. The ballroom overflowed with power. Senators shook hands with CEOs. Socialites compared diamonds the size of raindrops. Waiters floated by with champagne and oysters. And there I was, the bride, glowing under the lights, yet already feeling like a decorative centerpiece rather than a person. Alexander thrived in that room. He owned it. Every smile calculated. Every laugh practiced. Every compliment rehearsed. He introduced me like I was an ornament he'd acquired, not a woman he loved. My wife, Emily Reed, he'd say, his hand tight on my back, his eyes never on mine but on the men whose approval mattered more. Still, I told myself it was nerves. I told myself marriage was an adjustment. I told myself I was overthinking, but then came the whispers, the bridesmaid who avoided my eyes. The cousin of his who raised an eyebrow when I gushed about Alexander's kindness. The toast from his best man, who said with a smirk, "To Alex, may he finally learn to stay faithful." The laughter that followed sliced through me like glass. I laughed too, pretending it was harmless, but a seed had been planted. A seed I didn't want to water, but it grew anyway, twisting in my chest until I could barely breathe. By the time we reached the bridal suite, I was exhausted. My cheeks ached from smiling, my feet blistered from dancing. But my heart still held hope. Maybe now, away from the cameras and the crowd, I would see the real Alexander, the man who had once held my hand in Central Park, the man who whispered that he couldn't imagine life without me. The suite was a dream. Rose petals scattered across silk sheets, champagne chilling on ice, candles glowing in golden holders. I wanted to believe this was the beginning of a life together. Alexander kissed me, his lips warm, his hands firm, but his eyes. His eyes were somewhere else, distant, cold. He pulled away too quickly, pouring himself a glass of champagne. "To us," he said, raising the glass. I lifted mine with trembling fingers. "To forever," I whispered. He drank deeply. I barely sipped. Something gnawed at me. A silence. A distance. I tried to shake it off, tried to draw him close, but he brushed me away with a distracted smile. Then his phone buzzed. He froze. For a second, just a second, his perfect mask cracked. He turned the phone face down, but not before I saw it, the name flashing on the screen. Sienna. My stomach twisted. I knew the name. His friend, the one he insisted was just an old colleague. The one he said I was silly to worry about. I waited for him to explain. He didn't. He just put the phone in his pocket and kissed my forehead like I was a child. "Get some rest, darling. It's been a long day." And then, my husband, the man I had just promised my life to, left me. On our wedding night. At first, I thought he'd gone to smoke a cigar with the groomsmen. Or maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe I should give him space. That's what a good wife would do, right? That's what my mother always said. Be patient. Men are complicated. But hours passed. The candles burned low. The champagne went flat. Midnight slipped into 2 a.m., then 3, and I was still alone. Something inside me broke that night. Something small but sharp. A voice that whispered, "No, Emily, this isn't love. This isn't marriage. This is betrayal." I couldn't sleep. I paced the suite, my gown crumpled on the floor, my tiara abandoned on the nightstand. My body shook with rage I couldn't contain. And when his phone buzzed again, left behind on the dresser this time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. What I found burned into my memory like fire. Text messages. Hundreds of them. Photos, videos. His voice in recordings, whispering the same words he once told me. "I love you. I can't wait to see you again. I'm only marrying her for the family name. Her me." I scrolled until I couldn't breathe. My husband had been in love with another woman. He wasn't marrying me for love. He was marrying me for strategy, for appearances, for a merger between families. To him, I wasn't a wife. I was a pawn. My wedding night ended not in love, not in intimacy, but in betrayal so sharp it carved itself into my soul. I sat on the floor, the glow of the phone screen painting my face ghostly pale. My heart raced, my stomach churned, my eyes stung with tears, but underneath all that pain, something else stirred. Something darker. It wasn't just sorrow. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was rage. Pure, cold, bone-deep rage. I thought about the smirk on his best man's face. The whispers. The way Alexander paraded me like a trophy while already belonging to someone else. I thought about every vow he had made. Every promise he had broken before he even spoke them at the altar, and I made a vow of my own. He thought I was weak. He thought I would stay silent, humiliated, obedient. He thought I would accept my place as his decoration, his accessory, his fool, but he didn't know me, not really. That night, as the city lights flickered through the window and the sound of distant traffic hummed below, I wiped my tears. I stood tall in that empty suite, and I promised myself Alexander Reed would regret the day he betrayed me. My revenge had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Not a single minute. I sat in that bridal suite surrounded by wilting roses and melting candles, staring at the phone that held the truth of my marriage. My husband, my brand new husband, wasn't mine at all. He belonged to Sienna. He belonged to greed, to ambition, to a family empire where love was just a decoration. And I realized something with bone-deep clarity. If I stayed silent, I would disappear. I would become exactly what Alexander wanted, an obedient shadow, a wife for the photographs, a puppet. No, I refused. That night, something inside me died. But something else was born in its place. A new Emily, one who no longer believed in fairy tales, one who was ready to burn the castle down. The next morning, when the sun poured through the curtains, I did what no one expected. I smiled. Alexander returned at dawn. His tuxedo jacket draped over his arm, his tie loosened. He looked surprised to see me awake. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked casually, like he hadn't abandoned me on our wedding night. I forced a soft laugh. "Too much champagne, I guess." He kissed my forehead, told me to get some rest, and collapsed on the bed. Within minutes, he was asleep, his chest rising and falling as if he hadn't just destroyed me. I stared at him, memorizing the lines of his face, the curl of his lips, the man I thought I loved. Then I put on the mask, because revenge is not loud. Revenge is not impulsive. Revenge is patience, and I would wait. Life as Mrs. Reed was a performance. I attended charity galas in sparkling gowns, smiled for the paparazzi, and sat beside Alexander at dinners with senators and CEOs. To the world, we were perfect. To his family, we were powerful. But behind my smile, I was studying him. I learned his schedule. I learned his weaknesses. I learned the cracks in the empire he thought was unshakable. And I learned about Sienna. She wasn't just a fling. She was ambitious, ruthless, hungry for the Reed fortune. Their messages revealed plans, not just for romance, but for takeover. Alexander had promised her everything: money, power, even children. I was nothing more than a stepping stone. The humiliation burned me alive. But I didn't cry anymore. No, I sharpened my pain into a weapon. While Alexander thought I was shopping with his credit cards or gossiping with other socialites, I was working. Quietly, I hired a discreet private investigator. I dug into Reed Enterprises' financials, learning things Alexander never imagined I could understand. I built allies in silence, secretaries, assistants, people who had been invisible to him but were eager to whisper in my ear, and all the while, I played the perfect wife. I kissed his cheek for the cameras. I laughed at his jokes. I let him believe I was blind, but I saw everything. One evening, 3 months into our marriage, Alexander told me he had to attend a business dinner. I smiled, kissed him goodbye, and pretended to believe. But I followed him. My hands shook as I sat in the back of a black car, watching through tinted glass as he walked into a private club. An hour later, Sienna arrived. She wore a red dress that clung to her like fire, her hand sliding onto his arm like it belonged there. They kissed, right there. In public, without shame. And in that moment, the last trace of love I felt for Alexander Reed died. I wasn't just betrayed. I was erased, but he had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated me. Reed Enterprises was built on image. Stock prices rose and fell with reputation. Deals were sealed not just in boardrooms, but in society pages. Alexander's greatest strength, his perfect facade, would become his greatest weakness. I collected evidence. Photos of him and Sienna, messages, recordings, bank transfers that linked him to shady shell companies. Slowly, carefully, I built a case that could shatter him. But revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about timing, and I waited until the night of the biggest Reed Gala of the year. The ballroom sparkled just like our wedding night. Chandeliers glittered, champagne flowed, laughter filled the air. But this time I wasn't the naive bride. I was the executioner. I wore a gown of midnight blue, my hair swept into a crown of curls. Alexander stood beside me, confident, smug, shaking hands with politicians and billionaires. Sienna was there too, hidden among the crowd, her eyes burning with the arrogance of a mistress who thought she had already won. They had no idea. When Alexander stepped up to the podium to deliver his annual speech, I slipped away. My heart thundered, but my hands were steady as I signaled the AV team I had quietly bribed. And then it happened. The giant screens behind Alexander flickered to life, not with his speech, with the truth. First, the photos. Alexander and Sienna in hotel rooms, in cars, in his office. Then the videos, his voice promising her everything. And finally, the documents. Proof of fraud, bribes, offshore accounts. Gasps rippled through the room. Glasses shattered on the floor. Cameras flashed, recording every second. Alexander froze at the podium, his face drained of color. "Turn it off!" he roared, but it was too late. The empire he thought was untouchable crumbled in minutes. The scandal spread like wildfire. Newspapers devoured it. Stock prices plummeted. Reed Enterprises lost millions overnight. Alexander tried to blame me. He screamed, he threatened, he even begged. But I had been careful. I had covered every track. To the world, it wasn't me who betrayed him. It was him who betrayed himself. Sienna vanished when the money dried up. His family turned their backs. His friends disappeared, and Alexander Reed, the man who once stood above the world, was left with nothing. People asked me later if I felt guilty. If destroying him gave me peace, here's the truth. Revenge is not peace. Revenge doesn't heal the wounds. It doesn't give you back the nights you cried alone or the dreams that burned to ash. But revenge gives you something else. Power. And in this world, power is the only thing that keeps you from being broken again. I walked away from Alexander Reed not as his wife, not as his victim, but as the woman who ended him, and I promised myself I would never again believe in fairy tales. Because I wasn't the princess in this story, I was the queen, and queens don't beg, they conquer. If you liked my story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks for watching!